tell us briefly what the Revolving Door Project is and why you guys formed.
Sure. So the Revolving Door Project is a group that basically tries to explain to progressives, to the media, to anyone who's listening, frankly, how exactly the executive branch of the government works. There's a lot of great people who do a lot of work in advocacy around the legislative branch. Some folks do work on the judiciary. We noticed that there's basically this major absence for progressives trying to understand how the actual bureaucracy works, how things like, different cabinet departments and the FTC, the SEC, and so on work, and more specifically, how they often get corrupted or co-opted by the corporate interests that they're supposed to be regulating, supposed to be overseeing, and putting white-collar criminals behind bars. So we try to, first and foremost, explain how those processes work, and then especially to highlight how important it is to appoint people to lead those departments, because things often flow from the person at the top, who are independent, who are committed to the public interest, and who actually believe in this agency actually doing its job, instead of basically just being someone who is trying to extract handouts, extract giveaways, and lessen regulations and so on before they revolve back out into their next job. So that's a little bit about RDP and what we do.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I even just explaining it as I introed you, I was like stumbling, because you're really kind of a watchdog over the executive branch and all of these appointments and nominations. And obviously we know that like Trump's nominations were just bonkers. It was like the people who wanted to destroy the EPA get to be head of the EPA, like that, like literally clubbing a baby seal, then you get to, like look out for the Arctic wildlife refuge or whatever the hell, so tell me about the current administration. Like, how does the Biden administration fare when it comes to cabinet members who have corporate ties, who were like former corporate lawyers? What grade would you give Biden? And maybe tell us about some of these folks who are in office now.
Sure. So on the subject of grades, so around the 100-day mark, which is a couple of months ago at this point, we put out basically a report card for how we felt the Biden administration was doing in terms of reducing or minimizing influence from a bunch of different key industries, big oil, big tech, Wall Street, and so on. Our basic conclusion is that Biden is Biden is basically the best president of our lifetimes on this thing, but that's because every other president of our lifetimes has been so frankly horrible on these types of issues.
There's no more corporate lawyers left to hire.
Exactly. The bar is the floor. So Biden is walking upright. He's not crawling, basically. We gave him overall a B- essentially on these issues. We think that he is basically making a very good faith effort to try to actually bring in public interest voices, bring in progressives, bring in people who are going to have a different perspective than this sort of neoliberal corporate technocracy consensus that we've all lived under for our whole lives. Those progressives and so on are a seat at the table. They are not controlling the space. They are often up against or have as advisors or people in other roles, folks who are sort of those classic revolving door types of figures, in part because some of those advisors and so on are people who clearly were setting themselves up to be the next labor secretary who's going to bust unions, or the next treasury secretary who's going to give a lot of handouts to Wall Street and so on. The politics of this have very clearly shifted, and I also think that Biden, in good faith, wants to see himself as the sort of mediator of all these different factions within the Democratic Party. So Biden is doing better than expected. He isn't doing great. I wouldn't say that he's especially meeting what I think that the moment demands, but he is willing to talk. He is willing to sort of be in a room, and that is vastly more than he can say about any of his predecessors in a very long time.
Have you become a patron yet? Patreon.com/Bitchuation is where you can directly support this show and help me make it sustainable so that I can do more of what I do best, doing this.